Hi guys, this is Mike. In this video, I'm going to talk about Cinema4D rendering basics. So you can see that I have this very simple scene set up. I have 3 objects. I also have a S-curve, 1 camera, and I have 1 light, just to keep this pretty simple. So we're going to talk about some of the basic ways that we can go over how to render within Cinema4D. And if you go up to the top menu, you can see we have a render menu, and we have a few different options where we can choose to render. Now we're going to go to render view, or Command R on your keyboard. So when we click render view, we get a render within our viewport. It stays within this interface, and we don't have it go to the picture view. So you'll notice when you render, you get these orange boxes that come up within your viewport. These are called buckets. And once that bucket is rendered, then it will move to the next area that has not been rendered. And depending on how complex your scene is and the various settings that we have in rendering, it could be shorter or longer. And that generally tends to be what type of how many lights you have, how many shadows, how many reflections, like if you have a glossy material. So that can depend on a lot of different things. How complex the scene is will make your render time go up a little bit longer. So you'll notice that we can either render within this menu, but you also have these icons here. Now the first one is render to picture viewer, so I'll click that again, and you can see that it renders within the viewport. And as I said, also you can use Command R. Now what we also have, if you go to render, we have an option called render region. So if I click on render region, you'll notice now my cursor has changed to a plus sign. So when I click, hold, and drag, you can see we get this white transparent box. And if I release the mouse or stylus, you can see that we have the same buckets that come up before, but it only renders within that square, within that rectangle that you created. So if I can do this again, I can go to my render region. I can do this just on this section here. And you can see it just renders within this little rectangle box that I made. So it's really good, so you don't have to render out your entire scene. You just want to see how this one particular object looks without rendering all the rest of the parts of your scene. Say if you change a color, say if I go to say like this blue color, and I want to go to this, I'll just drag it over to this object, and then I go to render region, I can see how that looks instead of rendering out the entire scene. So I'm just going to undo, go back to our orange. So that's another way we can render within the viewport. Let's see what else we have here. We also have, if you click on render, you can see that we have an interactive render region. So if I click on this particular option that we have, you can see that we have this box that comes up within our viewport. And we have these little points which we can make this box a little bit larger. And we can use just these points like on the top here. And if you just click, you can see we have this hand tool or a hand icon that comes up on our cursor. We can move the entire box. Now if we right click, we get a very simple setup. We have our alpha mode, lock to view. Now lock to view is important. So if you go to say one of your other type of views, like if we have our force set up, if we have here, and we go up to our top here, and say we want to move this object around, we can do that. Oops, I'm moving the S-curve. If I go back to my object 2 and I can move this, you can see how where it's interactive. So anytime I move this object, it automatically renders within this interactive box. So I can move this again, and you can see it automatically renders. So that's what that lock to view means. And then we have our interactive render settings, and we can save this interactive region as well to our computer, to our hard drive. So I'm going to go back to our perspective view. Now I want you to notice something, that if you notice, the render isn't really perfect. So what you can see is some graininess, and it doesn't look all that great. You can see we have some banding here at the top where we have a little bit of a glossiness. So in order to fix that, we have this little arrow here. If you look at my cursor, we have this little icon, this little arrow icon right over here on the right hand side. Now if I click hold and drag, you can see if I drag it down, it makes the render worse, or I should say lower quality. And if I drag it all the way at the top, you can see that we have a higher quality. And it takes a little bit longer to render, so just keep that in mind. So we have a nicer render, we have a nice glossiness, and you can see that we have a lot of the other issues that we had with the quality goes down. Now, usually by default is in the middle, so we get like a middle range with our render. Now, this is really good when you want to keep it, fairly low, so that when you render, it doesn't take too much time. You just want to get an idea of what it's going to look like when it's rendered. So that's why this interactive render region is really useful. Now we also have another option here for rendering in the viewport. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to our render, and I'm going to turn off our interactive render region just by clicking on this menu. Now if I go to render, we also have render active objects. So let's click on this so you can see that we have our object 2 selected within our objects manager. Now if I go over to render active objects, I'm going to click on that, and we'll see what we get. Now you'll notice that it isolates that one object that you have selected. So you lose all the background information. So any type of lighting, that bounce lighting that you might have from the background, or any environment that you have around it, any of the other objects, you can see that we now have lost that the reflection from our other object onto this object. If with the glossy material that we have on this object, so it just isolates that one object. Now, if I select, say, the object 2 and the S-curve, and we go back to our render, we can go to render active objects. Now you can see that it just isolates those two objects that we have, the S-curve and objects 2. So it's a good way of seeing just the object within the scene, and you can just kind of clear out all the other objects and just focus on that one particular object. So it's just another way that Cinema4D allows you to render within your viewport, and all of them have their, the ways that you can do it, and each have their pros and cons. So as you go through the process of rendering and to get a preview of what your objects and what your scenes are going to look like, you're going to be using different ones at different times. I find that sometimes I use all of them for the same scene. Sometimes I just want to see a quick little render to see each of the shadows. So sometimes I'll just use the interactive render region or the or just the render region, when I just want to see how a shadow works and how it looks. Well, I don't want to look at anything else. I just want that just to see how the shadow looks on the background. So, and that's just one example, but you're going to find that you're going to be using all of them at different points. Okay, let's talk about render to picture viewer. So if I go to render, you can see we also have render to picture viewer. So if I click on that, you can see we have a new window that pops up within Cinema4D, and it renders out our image within this window. So let's take a look at this section over here. We have our history. So if I render again, and let's change my color to this soft pink here for this green. And then I render to picture viewer again. We can also use Shift R, or we can use this icon here to render to picture viewer. So it's this middle icon. So if I click on this, it renders again. And we have this history state that we can take a look at. And it gives us a little bit of a history of which was rendered. And we have information for everything about this image. We have our layer, filter, and this is non-applicable. So we have this image. Now let's say I want to save this image. Well, I can go over here to this icon here and click save. And we can choose various different format options. If we want to choose a TIFF, a PSD, PNG, so we can take a look at those, and we can save out our image based upon these settings. And so if we click OK, you can see that we'll have a pop-up for our dialog on where we want to save in our directory. Now we also have the ability to use our image in another photo editing program such as Photoshop. So if I go to edit and I go to copy, and then I go to my program, whatever it may be Photoshop, I can just open up a new document and then paste in my image using Command V, and then I can then work on this particular image within my Photoshop program or whatever program that you use for photo editing. So that's how we move to and save to picture viewer. Now we also have a few different options within when we render. So let's, for an example, we can go to A/B split. Now if we click on this image, so I'm right clicking on this image and I'm going to choose A. So I'm going to go to my first image that I rendered, right click and go set as A. And then I want to go to my second image, right click, set as B. And you can see these little icons here, these little images, it says A and B. Now we also have this white line that has come up within our picture viewer. Now we can move this around, giving us an idea of where our, we have A at the top and B at the bottom. Now we also have a few different options here at the top. So we can disable that AB, we can bring it back. Now what you can also do is you can set your AB image depending on where, which image that you have selected. So let's say I have this selected and I want to make it A. I can click on here. And then if I go back to my other image, I can make that B. So we have a few different options. You can right click on this image or you can use these icons here. So, and we also have a swap. So we can swap AB. So if you want to switch them back and around, and we can isolate. And what we can also do is we can switch from a vertical or a horizontal. So you can see that a little bit different, a little bit better as I move this line around. So it's a good way of just kind of taking a look at an image and being able to look at the image side by side and see how it looks. And it's really good for like if you're doing some subtle changes. So I noticed that when I'm ever doing anything where I kind of see something and I want to see if I can change it a little bit differently, I'll use a render and I'll use this split A/B testing for that. So that's how we render to the picture viewer. Now, what I have not talked about yet is the render settings. So you'll notice that we have our render to viewport, render to picture viewer, but we also have render settings, and that's this little icon here. So if we click on that, we can see that we now have some options of how to render out our final image. So first, you're going to notice that we have a drop down here, and we have the standard rendered, and that's what we've been rendering with this entire time. Now, we also have physical render, and we have a few other options here, but we're going to spend time just talking about the standard and the physical for this basic tutorial. So if I click on standard, and we have our output, this is our first menu that we have set up here within the render settings. Now the output is going to be the width and height and just the basic aspects of our image that we're going to render out. Now we have 1280 by 720, and we can adjust this by using these arrows and up arrow and down arrow. Or we can actually just highlight and type in an actual value of what we want to use for our width and height. And we also have our lock ratio. So if I wanted to go to say 1920, it's going to keep that locked to that ratio. So it's going to be 1920 by 1080. So that's good when you want to keep that ratio locked. Now, we also have our resolution. We also have some aspects here such as frame rate for our animation. And we also have for animation, if you're going to be rendering out a bunch of frames, you can choose all frames, or you can type in a specific range. So say you wanted to just have the first 10 frames or the last 10 frames of the animation, you can do that as well. So next what we can do is we can go to our save. This section here will be for what format it's going to be and where you're going to put it in your directory on your hard drive. So first we want to make sure that this is checked, and we have a file and a field here that we can add in. You can see this little ellipse. When you click on it, you can then save out that within your hard drive, and you can give that its name. Now we have our format, and we have various amounts of different formats that we can save this out at. Now I want to make sure that you understand that if you're going to be saving out an animation, you want to use one of these MOV or MP4 file formats. You can also save out as a one of these images, say a TIFF or PSD, something like that. Usually would go something like say a TIFF, and then you would go back to your output and choose all frames. Now what this would do is it would save out all the images, all the frames within your animation as images. So then you would bring that into another program such as After Effects for any type of post-production, and that would give you a little bit more control as opposed to just saving out one file format. So I'm going to bring this back to current frame, and I want to bring this over to say our image and where we want to save this out at. Now I also want to point out one thing. Since we're here, we can also save out a transparency. So if you click alpha channel and then you choose a format, say PNG, and where is that PNG right here, you can save that out where you have an image, Just as long as you don't have a background on your Cinema 4D scene, it's just completely black. What you can then do is save that out as a PNG, and it would be a transparent background that you would bring into, say, Photoshop or a photo editing program, or After Effects as well. So you can do that. So what else? Let me uncheck, just make sure this is all unchecked. And we have multipassing. I did a tutorial on multipassing, and I'll just go over it briefly. But what you would do is, if you would set this up, you can then set a multipass of different passes on your render. For example, you would have light, shadow, reflections, you would have ambient occlusion. All those would come out in a separate rendered layer that you would then bring into, say, Photoshop, and then you can adjust those. It gives you a lot more control. And if you're going to be rendering out something, it's a good idea to maybe experiment with multipass, and please take a look at that tutorial, and that'll give you some options of when you want to use that, when you bring it in, and then you can experiment within Photoshop or another program. Okay, so next we have anti-aliasing. So when you render out an image, and I'm gonna render to picture viewer, we have options for the amount of quality that we have on some of our edges. Now I'm going to zoom in a little bit. So I'm going to go to this down here in this field. We can go to, say, 200%, and it gives us a little bit of a we can see a little bit of our angle here on this little curve. You can see that we have a little bit of a jaggy edge, and you're going to see that when you have a very low anti-aliasing. Now it's set by default to our geometry, but you can also go to best, and you have these minimum levels and maximum levels. We usually just kind of keep these to default at these at the current setting, but you can also experiment with maybe going 2x2. That might give you just enough, but keep your render a little bit lower. So let's do a render to our picture viewer. With these settings, we have our best settings. You can see that we have a little bit better of a smoothness along these curves. So I'm going to go back to our original, and you can see that we just by, and I might be able to go even further in. So I'm at 300%, and you can see that we have a little bit better quality when we're using this best setting. So if you want to have the best possible quality of your edges, it's a good idea to make sure you have your anti-aliasing set to best. Now, if you're just doing a preview and you just want to have your renders go very fast, you want to set this at geometry, and that'll give you an idea of how the whole render is going to look. And then when you're ready to go for a final output, you can go to best. Now, I also want to show you a few other options here. We have effect, and we have our multipass. Excuse me, I talked about that before, but this is where you would go for some of those options. Now for effect, what you can then do is go, say, ambient occlusion, and then let me bring this back down to 100%. And I'm going to do a render to picture viewer again. I'm actually going to go to my anti-aliasing, and I'm going to go back to geometry just so we can make this a little bit quicker of a render. So if I render, you can see that we have our ambient occlusion set. And what that's going to do is that's going to, whenever you have geometry that's very close to another piece of geometry, such as edges and creases and corners, you're going to have a little bit of shadow. And it just mimics a more realistic look, and it gives you a little bit more detail that comes through when you have ambient occlusion set. So I'm going to go back to my previous rendered image without the ambient occlusion. And then I'm going to go back to the one we just rendered with ambient occlusion. And you can see that we have a little bit better shadowing within some of our corners and our little crevices here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to our A/B test again, and I'm going to remove the A/B here, set as A, and then set as B. And this is a good way to really kind of take a look at how this looks with our ambient occlusion on. You can see, especially at the bottom of our images, you can see that we have a nice little shadow that comes through. Might be a little bit too dark, but I think this proves a point, and you can see how that kind of looks. So when you're ready to do a final render, it's a good idea to maybe experiment with the ambient occlusion and see how that turns out with your renders. One other effect that I want to show you is global illumination. Now, if you click on Effect, you can find a global illumination right here. And what I did off screen or not recorded was I rendered out a global illumination render. And what global illumination is that when you render without it, it just has the light that goes and shows up on your object, but it doesn't bounce off the object and onto other objects within your scene like natural light does. You will have a reflection that bounces off, and it gives you a little bit of backlighting within your scenes. So it gives it a lot more realistic look. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my previous render, and this was the one where we had ambient occlusion, and this one is the one where we have global illumination. Now you can see that just basic by previewing it right at the start, you'll notice that it's just a little bit brighter. But the reason why is, especially if you look at some of the back areas of this image, of these objects, So I'm going to go to 200% and take a look at this area back here. So if I go to our previous render, you can see that we have a very dark shadow here. You can't even see the back of this object on this particular object. Now, if I go to the render with global illumination, you can see that we have a little bit of backlighting, and that's from a light bouncing off the background and then reflecting back onto this object. So it gives you a little bit of extra detail that you wouldn't be able to see if you didn't have global illumination on. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to render this again to show you how long, show you the difference. I'm going to bring this back down to 100%, but I'm going to show you the difference in terms of rendering time. So I'm just going to render this exactly the same, and you can see that we have it renders slightly different than we had with our previous renders. It doesn't have the buckets just yet. You can see down here that we have our time and we have our different passes that this will go through in order for the computer to calculate those lighting and shadows. So you can see that just basically the time goes up, and you can see that we have our render time with just the ambient occlusion. This has global illumination and ambient occlusion, global illumination and ambient occlusion. And you can see now that the buckets start rendering within the viewport, the picture viewer. So I just wanted to do that just as a matter of just showing you the render time and how it goes up when you use global illumination. So I'd like to show you next the physical render. So if you go to, from standard renders, you go to this menu here, you will go to physical. By the way, I didn't point this out before, but if you have any third-party render engines, such as V-Ray for C4D or Redshift or Octane, these would be located here. They would be a plugin that, or they would appear as a plugin within Cinema 4D. So I just wanted to point that out, that you would go to those here. And we have the new version of ProRender, which is also within this dropdown as well. But you would go to the physical render. Now, the difference between the standard and physical is basically the physical is just a little bit more of a modern render engine within Cinema 4D, and it handles things like subsurface scattering and global illumination and reflections. It handles it and it renders it a little bit faster than the standard render. So I just wanted to point out that those differences. So if you go to the physical render and you go to anti-aliasing, you're going to notice that these are grayed out. And so going back to the physical, in order to handle some of the quality issues within your render, you would use this sampler adaptive. You have adaptive, fixed, and progressive. We're going to keep it at adaptive. And we have our sampling quality. And you can see here that we have our low, medium, high, and we also have automatic. And that's probably the best way if you want to just have a very simplified process. You would use automatic, and then you would use this shading threshold right here. You would adjust this value. So I'm going to go back into this menu, and I'm going to go back into these various different low, medium, and high. So what I did in between recordings, I rendered these out just to save you from sitting and watching me render. I rendered these out, and you can see that we have a physical low, a physical medium, and a physical high. Now you can notice, I'm going to zoom in again into this shadow and get a better look at this shadow back here. You can see how we have a kind of a grainy kind of look here for the shadow. Now that's on physical high, physical low, excuse me. And if we go to the physical medium, you can see that cleans it up a little bit better, and physical high really cleans that up and makes it smoother and just makes it look a little bit nicer. Now, I want you to direct your attention to the render time that we have here. So we have our, let me just kind of scoot this over a little bit. We have this physical low, and you can see the time about 23 seconds. Now we go to physical medium, you can see that it jumps up all the way to 119, and then the physical high is almost 4 minutes long in terms of render time for just this one image. So I just want you to be, I just want to show you that as you move that level up, low, medium, high, once you get to high, you get some pretty long render times. And if you're doing an animation and you're rendering out a lot of different frames, this could take a long time to render on physical high. So you would probably do a lot of previews with the physical low. And also keep in mind, let me go back to my render settings, and I go back to my output. I left this at 1920 by 1080 when I last changed this. So you would go probably something lower, 1280 and by 720 in order to give you a faster render time when you're doing a preview. So I do want to point that out, that size is a lot, makes a big difference as well. One option that we have that is pretty useful in our render settings is render presets. So you notice down here at this bottom here, we have my render settings. And what we can then do is we can save any of our options here and go back to it anytime we need it. So if I right click within this area, we can go to new, and this will be our new render setting that we will save. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my render settings. I'm going to double click on it, and I'm going to type in something like low preview. And you can name this anything you like that's a little bit more descriptive of what you're doing. But just for this purpose, I'm just going to name it low preview. And I'm going to make this 1280 by 720. That's fine. And I'm going to go to AntiAliasing, keep it at low geometry. And I think I'll keep everything the same. I'll keep it very basic. And this will just be my low preview anytime I want to do a render. So I'm going to render this out. And I want to go back to my render settings. So I have this one render. Now what I can also do is make another one. And I'm going to name this maybe high final. But I'm going to make this 1920. And I forgot to check the lock ratio, so I'm going to type in 1080. And I'm going to go to anti-aliasing, and I'll go to best. And let's say I want to add in an ambient occlusion. And I think that'll be fine. If I could put in global illumination as well, and that could be my final. So if I click on this, you can see I have my final. If I go to low, we have our 1280. If I go to my high final, and what I'm doing is I'm just clicking on these the text area, but you can also choose this white icon, click on that and go back and forth between your low preview and your high final. And so I can render this out. So this is a really good way of having, you go through all these little different options, and you can always have them in a preset that you can have saved here. So anytime you want to go back to it and render these out, you can have your low preview and your high final, or whatever you want to call it, something a little bit more descriptive. But I just want to point that out. This is a really good option to have. And it'll save you a little bit of time and having to reset a lot of your settings that you use a lot and most often. I put a link in the description to download project files. You can download the project file from this course as well as all the videos that I've made so far at astronomicskills.com. Thank you.